when you hear the scripture, it's the parable of the lost son. You hear about the lost son and his redemption, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. So starting in verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, came home, you killed the fatted calf for him. My son, the father said, You are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is now found. So like I said, most of the time we hear the story, it's about the son. Came back, found redemption. Everybody of his brother was super happy and ecstatic about that. In my life, everything is pretty consistent. I know on Mondays, Bailey Grace has dance. So I know when I walk in the door, Shauna's gone and taken her across town. I know on Tuesdays that up until last week, Jacob has soccer practice and Claire has batting cages at Willamette. It's a lot of the same consistent things over and over and over. We don't get praise for it. We don't get praise for the car rides week in and week out. We don't get praise for the dinner that was hustled out the door as you're going along. Or, when you walk in the door and it's waiting for you. One thing we can kind of count on is that the plate that was taken out the door will be found sitting in the car. Weeks later as I was getting out at church, I look in the door. One of the back doors, I'm pulling my Bible out, and there's a cup from the last person that had juice in my car. And I'm like, I'll remember to pick that out, maybe in the next day or two or when we get back. It's even to the point where there was about a month ago, Jacob was looking for this certain bowl. There's a certain bowl he had to have dinner in for spaghetti or whatever it was we were having, and it was dirty in the dishwasher, and he's just all bent out of shape because he doesn't have this certain bowl that we have, which I don't understand why it's so special, but whatever. And, Mom reminded him that neither did you make the meal nor do the dishes, so you can get over your complaint about this bowl. And he kind of went, oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. I know, wash it. But that's the dishwasher's job. Well, yeah, it had to get into had to get in there somehow. In our life are to the points where, our kids go about doing what is normal to them week in and week out from school. My wife and I we're already like halfway done with our Christmas shopping because we just know that, A, we got to have a budget so we know what we're going to have for it. And B, during the course of the year, we have to pay attention to them because, a child's hopes, wants, needs, desires changes by the season and by the year. And so you hope you didn't get something 6 months ago that all of a sudden is not their favorite thing. And, but it's like, we've got vacation for next summer. My wife found something. She's like, oh, this would be a great opportunity for next summer. And we already have the down payment on our, the place that we're staying for it. Because you can get a cheaper rate if you do things early. Kids haven't even thought about it. We mentioned it once and they went, no, okay. But we plan this stuff out because we're consistent. We've lived, we've been married now for a couple of decades, and we just know that in our life, planning is a major part of what we do. Our kids, chaos is what they do. They walk out of the shoes, Mom, where's my shoes? Well, are they where your shoes go? I don't know where my shoes go. Well, your shoes have gone in the same place forever. Normally where their shoes go is wherever they dropped them when they walked in the door. The son of the parable asked, Why didn't you give me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends? He was looking for the praise because he was the consistent guy. He was the guy that showed up every single morning to milk the cows and do all the hard labor work. And he was more than likely, because he was in that family, he was probably a manager of the others that worked there. And so he did a lot of the hard labor, while his brother was already thinking 3 steps ahead about the future, or at least what he thought his future was going to look like. So while his brother took off, He was, and if you think about it too, is like when the one brother got half of what his inheritance was going to be, his brother was the one that was building up that inheritance. He was the one that was adding worth and value to his father's land. So not only did he get all of his money early, the one that probably should have gotten more or whatever would eventually was the one that was stuck doing all the labor for it. And in the real world, this tends to happen, I would say, at people's jobs. And I've been in this situation because I've been a manager in several places and had people above me and below me. And, you don't really get a praise for being to work on time or not calling in sick because that's kind of just what you do. You show up for work. If it says be to work at 9, you're at work at 9, and you're pretty consistent. But then there's the others that I've worked with at various jobs, and they were consistently late. They would be there 1, 2, 3, 5. And, you'd say, well, my clock is set for X, Y, and Z. Set it for 3 minutes sooner. And then, then they'd start the policy where, like, just send them home. If they show up 3 minutes late, send them home. That works one time because they're like, woohoo, day off. Like, this policy doesn't work either. And so then what tends to happen is that those that are consistent and show up to work, they get to do their job and that other person's job. Absolutely. Been there, done that. And exactly, pile on. You know why? Because we know you're going to get it done. And, at the end of every year, we get, this last year they decided that if you had any sick hours left for the year, because they give us 6 days worth of sick pay, that you could cash it out at the end of the year, which is the first time our company's decided to do that. And I don't take sick days, so I didn't take any. And of course, I've got the guys that are just like, I don't feel like working today, so I'm going to take a sick day. They were just like extra vacation days. They made for long weekends. And so the end of the year came along, and we got all of our pay, and I got all my hours. And the one guy going, I had no hours left. And I'm like, well, yeah, because you used them all. And he's like, sick days, and he was, goes ranting. He's like, sick days aren't for when you're sick. They're just for when you want to do fun stuff. I'm like, okay. That's your policy. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess that's okay for you if you want to take your time off. And the same guy came around last week because we're getting ready at the end of the month. At the end of the December, they're going to do the same thing again a year. It's one of those things where policies change year to year. So this may go on for a few years, and I'm like, all right, I'll get it while it's there. And at some year, they'll find it an invaluable tool, and they'll probably take it away again like they always have. And I told him, yeah, I haven't taken any sick days this year. And he's like, I'm taking mine all the last week of the year so I can just take the week off. I'm like, so you're literally going to wait until the last week when you could have gotten about an $800 paycheck so you can take a week off? Yep, because I don't care. I'm like, all right, that's you. That's not me. It was like, and I basically worked 2 jobs my entire life. I worked for Safeway for almost 20 years, and I worked for Coca-Cola Odwalla for almost 6 years now. And when I worked for Safeway, I only had I think I had 1 week's worth where I called in sick, and that was because I had walking pneumonia, and the doctor said she was going to send me to the hospital if I didn't take the week off. And so I had like a 5-day stretch, and it took like 103-degree fever, and she, you look at your lungs if you got pneumonia, and she's like, you are not a healthy man. And so I called in work that night and said, here's my doctor's note. Doctor says I can't work for a week. And at the time, my boss was like, okay, call in sick. Take your week. We'll see you in a week. Which he was kind of a hard man to work for, but when I called in sick, it was because Jeff was sick. And not that I didn't ever go to work sick. It's not I've never been sick in my whole life, but it's just between not being able to lose the pay for doing it and feeling like I'm letting the team down, I just kind of show up for work. And I don't know, it's just been the way that I've always been. It's just kind of always been I don't know if I'd say I was taught this way, but it was about consistency. And, it's like I could be doing something harder, and when I was throwing groceries, it was just kind of like, all right, you just suck it up, you move on, and you can go to bed when you get home. But the consistent ones, like I said, they're the backbone a lot of the time. They're the ones that get zero praise. They're the ones that they just they're the ones that can be counted on. And even in the church today, there's a lot of I would say a lot of flaky people that they're really super high on God for a week and they want to like be part of the ministry team, but then being part of the worship team means you got to show up for practice. Oh, but I don't want to do practice. Or they want to teach a class, but it means that you need to sit on in a class so you can see how it's done and how others at least pattern the model. And they'll do that for a couple of weeks, and then they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. And there's those that are sitting here that have done a lot of the same consistent things week in and week out, and you're the backbone. And the reason that we have a service this morning and the fact that John's not here right now and we're still carrying on is the sheer fact that, hey, John and others in here have taught me what we need to do is if we want to be a part and be a helper, that we need to, if we say we're going to be here, let's be here. And if we're sick, great. Let's try and find somebody that can fill in for your spot, and let's do that. And so today, I thank you guys that are here because you're helping me with, the worship team helped, and those that were doing tithes and offering helped, and and John can carry a lot on his back, and it seems like there's a lot going on all the time. And John just has this flow because he's done this for so many years, and he just knows that if God says do this, we go over here, and if the flow says we're going over here, we do it. And he just has that pattern down, and he just knows it. Just like in my job, I just know that if X and Y goes wrong, I know that I need to move on. So those that are here, I thank you for being part of my support team this morning and Helen's support team for being back there. And, we don't get a lot of thank yous all the time, but the one thing that we do get to see is we get to see growth. Because a lot of the time is for all the complaints about those that don't do anything or they do very little, the hope is that over time that they grow out of it. Like with my kids, they've all got, not all of them, all of them. They've all got bad habits, or they've had bad habits and habits to pull out of it. It's like right now we got Braylon Joy. She's 2 years old, and we're at this in-between potty stage point where she knows she's wet, so her answer is, let's strip all my clothes off. She won't use the bathroom, but she knows I'm wet. And so now it's like, and of course she'll do it during nap time, or she'll do it at bed. So then you wake up and all her blankets are wet. So she's in, like I said, in that in-between time point. And so now it's like mom and I are having to figure this out. All right, how do we know she's not quite ready yet. How do we trap her to keep her clothes on? So mom figured out this fabulous program that, we got to put her in zip-up pajamas. And then you got to put a safety pin on it because then she can't take her clothes off. And mom was looking for the safety pin last night at about 9:30 last night. Where'd the safety pin go? And because it's inevitable. It's like, how many times do you want to wash this kid's sheets? We already do 15 loads of laundry a week. Let's not make it 20. And, but eventually she'll get there. She will be potty trained, and it'll be a miracle. So she will, hopefully we'll get to potty training. She won't be 12 years old and going, I think I'm ready. And all the kids are at different levels. So, their struggles are, they're hoping with Jacob. So we go up and we go to Jacob, our middle schooler in 6th grade. Jacob was a terrible 5th grader. Terrible. He was probably one of the worst kids in the schools. Always in trouble, getting kicked out of class, never turning in his homework. And then miraculously 6th grade starts, and all of a sudden he's a straight A student. I'm like, what's going on with this? You were terrible. You were the one that the principal could count on once a week you were down there. And he's like, my teacher told me before the end of the year that he thinks I'm just really antsy and I can't sit in one class at the same time. But now we have multiple classes and I think I'm doing better. I'm like, oh, okay, problem solved. Well, problem solved-ish. And then he comes home and he's just all been out of shape and he's like, because his grades have been pretty good the first month and a half. And if you know anything about middle school, the teachers kind of go a little more lenient in the first couple of months, and then they try to put more weight on him and teach him better habits because they don't want to just hit him with a hammer to start off. They wait to do that. And comes home last week and he's like, I think I failed this math test. And, it's like, oh, great, are we falling back into the same old rut? And And it's like, well, they moved me up in math, and I didn't have time to study for this. And I'm like, you going to tell us that you moved up in math? Well, I didn't really think about it. I'm like, so they moved you up into a higher grade of math. So it's not because you're just messing around. No, because I didn't really know any of this material, and they'd been going on it for the last 6 weeks. So clearly something's going right. Why don't you tell us some of the good stuff once in a while? It's like, why is it everybody but us knows the good stuff? It's like you do all the good stuff at school, and then you come home, and it's just like Jacob, the other Jacob. And but we're working out habits. So we're trying to get them to be consistent people and learn consistent habits. So we're going to get one kid potty trained so we can consistently use the bathroom, and one kid consistently doing his homework so that he can be a good student and have a future and go to college, hopefully, and find something he's good at. And, and go up the line, and, the goal is, let's get you guys consistent. There's a lot to be said for consistent people. Because you know what happens with consistent people? They tend to have a lot less troubles. So though with all that, they have a lot more heaped on them, like I said. We tend to be the ones that people in trouble go to. People in trouble come to consistently not in trouble people. So it's solve my problems. And, I get it with kids and I get it with adults, and they ask me their different questions. How do I go about solving, problems are all the same. They really are. We've got a problem, let's figure out how to get to B. And, I got one kid who's like, show me how to fold my laundry. How do I fold a shirt? Well, of course, Dad's way of folding a shirt is different than Mom's way of folding a shirt or a towel. But at least we're trying to figure this out. And I got an adult at work who's asking me, how do I start a 401k? And I'm like, well, let me show you. I had a guy last week who's had an issue with his cell phone plan, so I had to walk him through how to use our employee discount at AT&T so he could get a cheaper rate. And, because I just have all this weird and random knowledge in my head. But I'd say, looking back of it, I would rather be the consistent guy than the always in trouble guy. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be tired doing both, but I'd rather be tired and not stressed out. And, boy, I blew through my notes. I haven't even looked at half of them. But even when I was younger, this is one thing that kind of burned me up. When I was younger, my grandparents had a farm, and there was me and my sister, and I had 2 different sets of cousins, and one set of cousins lived on the farm. And it could be counted on that they weren't going to help my grandfather do anything. But they lived there, and it was just like, they disappeared. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere, so where are you disappearing to? But they disappeared. And during weekends in the summer, we took turns staying out there, and so it was counted. We just knew that Grandpa was going to have some job for us to do, guaranteed. It was going to be helping in the garden and watering the garden and helping mow grass and cut. It was the work that can be done on a farm. And my grandparents in their 70s, they hadn't had livestock forever, but he had something going on 100% of the time up until the day he died. I mean, really, it took cancer to kill my grandfather because he was still chopping wood until the week before he got cancer. And it used to be funny to all of us because it could be counted on by about 9 p.m. Grandpa would fall asleep in his chair, and he would, he'd put the seat back. He'd be watching whatever the show was on TV, and Grandma would be looking at a magazine and watching it, and we'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden you'd hear the snoring start, and we'd all be chuckling away and laughing. And, come around 10 o'clock, Grandma'd shake him awake. All right, it's time for bed. And that's going to be a consistent story for my wife. She's like, man, I'm living this. And shake him awake, and he'd go change into his pajamas, and he'd go sit in bed and go read his Bible. And he taught a Sunday school class to adults, and they had a little, formulaic book sort of thing that he would go through. And so he read the scriptures, and he got himself ready, and he would do that. And that's what I remember. It was Grandpa snoring, Grandpa wake up, Grandpa to bed, and then repeat. He'd be up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., and would repeat it. And, we'd all find this funny. But now as an adult, I look at it and go, oh, I'm living this myself now. I'm up at 3 a.m. I go to work, I come home, do what chores need to be done, check in with the kids and make sure meals are done, whatever. And by about 9 a.m., Dad's sleep in bed. 9 p.m., sorry, 9 p.m. Boy, I have a really short day, 6 hours. And by about 9 p.m., I'm snoring away. Sean is shaking me. Turn off the TV, go to sleep. And it's pretty consistent. And I'm like, oh, not so funny when it's the one happening to you. But the thing is, it's a really, like I said, there isn't a lot of praise, there isn't a lot of reward, there isn't a lot of, you don't see a lot of it day in and day out. There isn't like the kid going, thank you for doing whatever this is, thank you for the car ride. Never, you don't get that. But it's nice when you have enough repetition at the end, you can start seeing transitions and impact and, God's doing this and that in their life. Because a lot of it is you've got to hit the kid where they're at, because every kid is different and every adult is different. And a lot of it's finding what is the area of their interest and finding what they're in. And right now my project is our second oldest, Cameron. So he turned 18, and between he's got autism, so finding him a job is rather difficult. And he was working for the M's until the season ended about 6 weeks ago. But, with him, if he had his way, he would just play video games all day or watch TV. So a lot of it is, all right, we need to find something to do more than just do that, because he really is a super easy kid. He does a lot of the same stuff. He likes a lot of the same food. He likes a lot of the same this and that. And so you can kind of forget about him from time to time, which is great because, one less trouble kid, but it doesn't do him any good. It's not going to make him long-term successful. So he's been kind of my project for the last couple of months. I guess month, I would say. And so I tend to go for walks, a couple of mile walks every day, and I like, Cameron, put your shoes on. You're going to come with me. And with Cameron, everything's kind of like the barter system. And he's like, all right, Cameron, we're going to go on. I go on this 2-mile walk that I go on, and I have this like weird ability that I can read while I walk. And I walk in a perfect square. And Cameron doesn't want to have like long conversations. He just wants to kind of like be with Dad. And so he'll go with me, and we'll walk around. Maybe not have even said 2 words to each other for 1.5 miles, but for him, it's he's out of the house and he's doing something. Because that's part of what the main activity is, getting him out of the house. And but see, he knows a couple of days a week, because we walk by McDonald's on Barger. He knows he's getting a drink on the way back. He knows it, so he knows that, like I said, it's a barter system. And so I know Joe's like, oh, this is hilarious because it's just Cameron. And but see, we've been getting him up to do more now lately, and a lot of it is he's such a night owl. It's trying to get him to wake up sooner. So he's been doing a lot with Dad to help pick up the house and clean the bathroom and things that really we definitely should have been working on with him like years ago. But because he's the easy one and he's the one that you don't have to like put a lot of pressure on, it's like, all right, we're going to start now and we're just going to keep consistent with it. But he's really good at it, and he doesn't fight me on it. And he's like, all right, so we pick up this room and we work on his room. And it may seem like really unusual for an 18-year-old, but with an 18-year-old with autism, a lot of it is you're building on building on building. And so it's like we need to get up, get dressed, make your bed, brush your teeth, do a lot of this repetitious stuff. And we're going to pick this up. And one of his younger brothers the other day goes, Cameron, you don't do anything. And he's like, I'm going to tell you, that is not true, because I just walked 1.5 miles with Dad this afternoon, and I picked everything up with you guys, and you guys were doing nothing. And they turned around and they went, is that true, Dad? I'm like, yeah, that is true. He's probably done more than you have today. And they went, oh. And they're starting to see it, that Cameron isn't just doing what he was doing before. And, and as the weeks go by, we expand on what he's doing. And so the new big thing is, like I said, it's a barter system. So here it comes. Here it comes, because it's going to get a good chuckle. So I said, I remembered that for graduation, the church got him a Bible for graduation. And I said, Cameron, here's the deal. If you read 5 chapters a day, 5 times a week for an hour, so in your Bible, and then we'll find you a book to read for an hour, I will buy you a 2-liter of your choice at the end of the week. And he jumped at this. He's like, are you kidding me? And I'm thinking, this is like $1. And I'm like, this is going to be the worst bargain in the history of bargaining. And he's like, I'll do that right now. So 4 weeks ago, he started on a Monday. And so Monday through Friday is when he does it. He started reading the Bible, starting in Matthew. And he's in Romans right now, but consistently. I do have to remind him, when are we going to read? And he's got to pick a time, and we got to get it in there. But every day, without fail, Monday through Friday, he reads his Bible, 5 chapters. Because if you do some math, 5 chapters a day, 5 times a week is the whole Bible in a year. And this is one of those things where it can go on perpetually. Because it's one of those things, well, for him, there isn't I'm finished. It's we'll get to the end and we'll start over again. Because like I said, it's about the bargaining chip. And, and my dad kind of gave it a weird little side eye when I told him about it the other day. He's we're bargaining for the Bible. I'm like, Dad, he's reading the Bible. How many kids do you know that are doing this? And he's like, all right, yeah, I kind of see where you're going. And we take a couple nuggets out of it and ask what he's read. And, he was reading in Acts the other day, and he's like, I really hate those people in the Bible that were lying about Paul. And, and he winds up dying because of this. And he's just ranting and raving. And Cameron's indoor voice is like shouting at Autzen Stadium. So it's loud. And I'm like, very clearly you're reading the Bible, Cameron. I know where you're at. And he's like, well, of course, because you told me to. And he's got, and it's so precise that he has a counter on his phone. He sets it for an hour every day. So he hits the counter, hits start, he reads his 5 chapters, and then, which takes him about 40 minutes, and he's got 20 minutes left over, so we have a book that we've picked out. And so Bible 40, another 20, and he just finished reading Tom Brokaw's The Greatest Generation book, because he loves history and loves World War II history, so I found stuff to do that. So he was reading that. And but the goal here is not to just get him to read the Bible so I can say that he's doing. It's to build his relationship with Jesus. Because with him, his relationship with Jesus is going to be different than your relationship. And not just that the person next to you, it's going to be totally different. And with him, and I've had the conversations, time and time, the save question about, do you have Jesus in your heart? And he's like, and of course, he has no gray area. So it's of course, Dad, of course I do. And what I'm building on and hoping that we get there this year is to get him baptized. But for him, he doesn't like to stand in front of people. So when we stood up here for the baby dedication last week, he was okay with it because his whole family was here and it was it was a safe environment for him. But if it's just him in that pool, it kind of puts him a little bit on edge. So I'm working on nuggets to get him towards being baptized. Like I said, it's about consistency. If I just went, oh, Cameron, maybe you read it today, but maybe not tomorrow, and do this today. But what's going to happen? Because this doesn't all fall on my shoulders. The Holy Spirit's got to have some impact on this. It's not just me going, here, read the Bible, and I hope you get something from it. I'm leaving room for Jesus to do what he's going to do in Cameron's life. And, it's not just words on a page to me, because when he reads it, like I said, I know he's reading it because we're having conversations about it, and I'm letting it dig in there. And it may not be this go around. It could be the 20th time that he's through the Bible. And I guarantee you, I'd almost put money on it, that in 20 years, or by the time Cameron turns 40, he will be on his 20th time through the Bible. And I will still be giving him 2 liters when he's 40 years old, because that's how Cameron is. But he'll make you pay. But I'll tell you, at the end of all this stuff, he doesn't gripe about it. He doesn't complain about it. It's just something he does. And so I found Cameron where Cameron is at. And every person that we have a relationship with, and even Jesus has a relationship, we have different relationships. Some of us are really boisterous and outgoing and, like Marilyn. Marilyn's relationship with Jesus is definitely different than mine. But I love it. I love how loud she is. And, some of us are really super quiet. Yeah, not you, Joseph. But we're all unique people. And I love every one of yours relationship with Jesus, because it shows that we don't all have to be the same. We look for normal. There really is no normal Christian anymore. Well, there never has been a normal Christian, ever. Even all the way back with Jesus, there's never been a normal Christian. We have a set of beliefs that we need to be, that we have everything based on, that Jesus is the Christ, he died and rose again. We all have that consistent belief. But our relationship with him is different to a person in here. If I ask you what God talks to you about every day, some of you goes, I haven't heard from God in 10 years. I just haven't. I'm like, well, do you have a relationship with him? Well, I do, and, this and that. Or some people just, they just don't leave a lot of room, I wouldn't say for prayer, but to listen. That there's a lot of, I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. And Jesus is going, be quiet. I got to tell you something. But each one of us has a different relationship with him. And we're going to find that our relationships change over time. That the thing about consistency is sometimes consistency is inconsistent. We're in seasons where worship is the most important thing for us, and being in the Word is the most important thing for us, and speaking to others is the most important thing to us, and fill in the blank. It changes, and it's consistently inconsistent. But sometimes you have to change things if you want to grow. Because then you can take all those things and you can mold them together. Because sometimes when it seems inconsistent, you need to be heavy in the Word because you're under attack. You need to be shouting for joy because you're just going through a super struggle, and you need to feel like you're shaking some of that off. Sometimes what you really need is you just need to have your butt in a pew because you need to get away from all the garbage that you're around at work. And you've got people here that are, even if they just shake your hand, is enough for you for the day and go, I can make it another couple of days, and I'll see you on Wednesday. It's kind of like one of those things with counseling. Some people go through counseling their whole lives, and they get nothing for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden there's a breakthrough. That's how our relationship should be with Jesus. That if we're not molding, growing, but staying consistent at the same time, putting it all together, that's how we build a strong relationship, because there is no done. The thing is with our relationship with Jesus, it's not like we're going to die and our relationship with Jesus is done. It's just going to get stronger in heaven. All we're doing is preparing ourselves for what that's going to look like.
Amen.
Boy, my notes are just whoo out the window.
All good stuff.
But like I said, it's shifting. My relationship with God is shifting, because it's like I realize I've got all these kids that God's put under me to teach and grow, and it kind of can have terrifying moments because you can look at their failings as your failings. And I've had some moments, and I had somebody to go, Jeff, your intentions are good, right? Well, of course my intentions are good. He's like, you don't get to eat their failure. It's not your fault. That you can do what you're doing at that given moment, and at some point they've got to learn with their mistakes, and let them eat it head first and see what happens afterwards, because your intentions are good. But and like I said, we have people that can take advantage of your activity. And it reminded me of, if you've ever seen the movie Back to the Future, it starts at the beginning of the movie, and George McFly, who's an adult of probably about my age, and he's sitting there at the table, and his boss has just wrecked his car, and he's like totaled it and telling him everything that's wrong with his car, even though he was drunk driving and wrecked it. And then at the end of all of it, he's like, oh yeah, I remember those reports that are due. You can give them to me Sunday afternoon because I like to sleep in. And of course he's doing the other guy's work. And then of course when the son travels back in time, he gets to see where all this started. That the same guy that's Dad's boss is also the same guy that was the bully to him in high school, and he was doing his dad's homework. So it was consistent. This guy was a consistent bully. That he did his homework then, and he did his homework in the future. And that's just kind of how the course of things can kind of take. But the one thing that, I think there's one thing that the son in the parable didn't take into account. He still had his half of the inheritance. It didn't go anywhere. It was still there, and it was growing because of the miracle of compound interest. That the one thing, whether it's money or it's livestock, sheep create sheep that create sheep that create sheep. And throughout, and really how much his inheritance was actually going to be on account of him, because he was more than likely one of the people in charge. So he basically was the determining factor of his own future. That if he wanted to retire with more, he needed to work a little bit harder. And brother was done. Brother spent everything. So whatever success was coming in the future, that he would have gotten way more if he would have, he got his half at that moment. You take another 40 years onto that, boy, a little brother's getting pennies when he could have gotten $100 bills. So the older brother, in his moment of anger, actually probably had a little bit better end of the deal coming in the long run. Now we're going to move on to point number 2. I only have 2 points. So we're going to go to Genesis 39, 1 through 6. All right, 1 through 6. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of the Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted his care to everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. And we'll stop there. So the one thing about Joseph is probably one of my 3 favorite people in the Bible. And just because he was an overcomer. And the one thing about Joseph is we can get hung up on what caused him to get into bondage. So we know that the coat that was given him by his father really instigated all of these events. He was a 17-year-old boy doing what 17-year-old boys do. Look what I got. Great. You can make it a coat now, or you can make it a pair of Nike high tops now. But it wasn't like there wasn't like sin involved. It was just like, look at me, I'm a prideful 17-year-old. Oh, I've never seen one of those before, ever. And then we transition to where we go from there to where his brothers are agitated enough that they stick him in a pit, they sell him into slavery, they tell their dad that he's dead, and all of a sudden his entire life is spun into chaos off of one little moment that really seems inconsequential if you really think about it. But the one thing that if we look at it too is that, remember over and over and over in Genesis 39 it said, and the Lord was with Joseph. He blessed Joseph. He blessed everyone around him. Okay, there is nothing in the scripture that said that he had this airtight relationship with God before this moment. There was no, he followed God all the days of his life and then, led up to this moment of coat. It went from this moment to God loved him so much. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting, because really at this point, where did his relationship with God come from? He was the great-grandson of Abraham, the founder. He had tradition. They had the tradition that was passed down from his great-grandfather. There was no there was no law, there was no religion, there was the relationship that had been passed down. But the one thing, if we know a relationship with God, to have a true relationship, it's got to be one-on-one. Your parents can't, build your relationship with God for you. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But so where did this relationship come from? I don't know. We're not told. All we know is that all of a sudden it went from he's getting thrown into a pit and sold into slavery to where, man, God loves his kids so much that literally everything he touches turns to gold. And I find that rather interesting because I just find it interesting that there's no, why God? Why are you blessing this kid and not because of whatever? We know that he had Abraham's blessing, so he had, the gift that would be passed down with that, so maybe that was it. But he's got a huge blessing. So he's still a slave, goes to a house, everything he touches is blessed, and so he's like the best of the worst. He's a slave, but he's the best of the worst. And I think he gets to the top, and he's like, all right, good. He's probably the best dressed of the slaves. He's probably the best fed of the slaves. He's got the most ability to wander around town, if he's allowed to go out, of everybody there. And he thinks he's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to take this as it is. I'm not in a great situation, but everything I do seems to go right. So great, I'm in this situation. But like I said, people see when things are going your way and want to take advantage of it, which of course Potiphar's wife did, which of course led him to go into a worse situation. So if slavery is not bad enough, how about prison? and not like jumpsuit prison where you're just in there and they give you a consistent meal, day in and day out. He's in a prison that probably has rats and water all over the place and cruddy food and terrible people and the worst of the worst. And he's in there as a 17-year-old boy, and he's like, wow, God loves me so much he put me in this terrible prison. But once again, Joseph starts from the bottom and he climbs himself up. So he is now the best of the worst again, in an even worse situation. But the Lord blessed him in everything that he did. So I'm just like, God, you kind of have a funny way of showing love sometimes. You put us in situations and it doesn't look like we're blessed, but you go, you know what? He probably got better food while he was in there. He had more control while he was in there. He was the, I don't know, what do you call it? The head of the prisoners? I don't know, whatever. I don't know if that's a terribly great title, but and just as it looks like things are getting a little bit better, and he has the two men from the palace, and he tells them their dreams, and he tells the one, hey, things are getting better for you. You're going to go back to where you were, and you're getting out of this prison, and life's going to go back to normal. And the other one, sorry to tell you, you're going to die. And of course, as the one gets put back into the palace, he says, don't forget me. Famous last words. He was forgotten. And I'm like, wow, so an event that got you out of prison. How many movies we see nowadays about the guy that's like wrongfully charged in prison, and through decades he sits there and then he's released and wants to thank the guy that helped get him out of prison, and but this guy was like, thanks, and then forgets him and walks out the door. But until it benefited him, because there had to be some benefit. So when Pharaoh had a dream that couldn't be answered, he's like, I remember this guy that when I was in prison with. Of course, he also didn't bother to go, oh, yes, I was supposed to tell you about him. I was Joseph. I'm just like stewing on this guy. And, he comes before Pharaoh and tells him his dream, tells him about what's coming. Guess what? Worse is coming. And let me find where I'm at. But with all of Joseph's toils and trouble and events and getting better and getting worse, God had been setting him up for this moment. This moment. He probably had more effect really next to Jesus on an entire people group from this next moment. So after he told the Pharaoh his dream, Pharaoh was like, you know what? Let's put you in charge of all this preparation. So we know we got 7 good years and we got a famine coming. Let's put you in charge of it. Great. So all of a sudden, he's gone from a slave to a prisoner to second in command, all like that, all in a couple of years. Power, absolute power. And, if you sit back, at the end of his days and look at it and go, if the event with my brothers in the coat hadn't happened, and the event with Potiphar hadn't happened, and the event with prison hadn't happened, you know what the ramifications could have been? The amount of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of death across the planet, the known world really at that point. The Egyptians would have starved to death. All of his family would have starved to death back there. So God was preparing him. It was a tough preparation, but God was preparing for him to change his life, his family's life, the world's life at that moment. It was to the point where, because Pharaoh they had to bring, was it 20% of everything that they had. But, I was looking back at it too, and it's like, somebody else had to know this was going on. This couldn't have been like, if things went before Pharaoh, it was unlikely they were secrets. So Joseph knew with the gathering of this, there had to be telling people that this famine was coming. But what happens in times when times are good? That becomes, let's spend everything we have because times are good. And so we hit the time of the famine, and people are beginning to run out of food. Like most likely he told them they were going to. They could have taken care of themselves if they would have actually saved some of this for 7 years. 7 years is a long time, but it isn't in some respects if you plan for it. And so he saves the nation, he saves his family, he saves his father, and brings them all to, Egypt and saves them all. But he spent so many years toiling. No one cared. No one cared. Who cared in that land that he was the best slave? Who cared that he was the best prisoner? No one other than God. God was with him and blessed him. Because for him, all he had was the blessing. Because we didn't hear that God came and sat with him. What he knew of God at that point was the blessing of God. The blessing of God was the incarnation, if you call it, of him coming to be with Joseph. It was the little bit of grace, whatever it was you want to call it, up until that moment. But all the way through, he gave glory to God. When he went before Pharaoh, he said, "This is not me, this is you." This is what God can do. I cannot answer your question. But like we say in the New Testament, all things are possible. All things. So without question, he's like, "I know your dream like that." He answered it. Didn't say that he had really any gifting. He did it in prison one time. That we know of. But it's recorded that he did it one time. So from a one time, that's a lot of faith. To have an event that affects a guy in prison, that if he's wrong, doesn't really affect him. This affected him and a nation. So he was bold enough to know that, hey, God's been with me in every place that I've been up until now. Let's just stick our neck out and go, God, I'm going to believe what you say is true. I'm going to believe that you're going to pull this dream out of this dude's head and you're going to put it in my mouth. And he answers it right away. And I found interesting too, is if you read further and further ahead in the story, that when the famine hit, that because of how ill-prepared everyone was, they got to the point where they ran out of money to give him. So they had land that they had to give him. And then they had livestock that they had to give him. So in the end, he wound up literally with everything. He wound up with all the land, all the animals, and everyone worked for him. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't like he had this money-making secret. Famine. What a great money-making secret. But he planned. I mean, in the way he's been and the way he'd blessed everything, like I said before, other people had to know. But he was consistent with the job that was given him. He was told to do one thing. Save food, give it out, and trade for it when the times hit. He did his job. I'm not loving that guy when I'm like giving up my land and giving up my ox and giving up my house and giving up, and then I get to work on my own land for you. But he was doing his job. And that's sometimes what we're called to do. Do our job, whether we like it or not, and how many people we irritate. Because I'm going to tell you, people at your job, and when you're consistent and you do a good job, people are irritated that you show up and do a good job. Because it makes them look bad. Because a lot of people like to sit under the radar. And occasionally, when the praise is there to be handed out, they're not getting it. And like I said, in life too, and we were talking earlier, life is transitioning. That our areas of worship are in different seasons of where we're at in the church, and life is in different seasons. And my wife and I are going through a changing season ourselves right now. That little Jericho that we had with us, he went to go live with his aunt and uncle or some distant relative in Eastern Oregon. And Shauna came up to me a couple days before he left, and she says, "I'm kind of ready to be done doing foster care." And I thought about it for a minute. I didn't hesitate. I'm like, "All right, what's the plan after this?" And she's like, "I want to get more involved in the foster community." Because the one thing that we've done in the decade plus that we've been doing it is that she's really good at navigating the system as far as, finding necessities and things and who to contact and do all this sort of stuff. And so that's what she wants to do. And I've got no problem with it. I'm like, it seemed like God telling us that this was the opportunity for it. Braylon's adoption was done a couple of weeks ago. I knew something was going on because God told me himself. He's like, you're going to go through a big transition the day that her adoption is finalized. So I've just been waiting for what that's going to be. And as soon as she said this, I had to get on board with this because God had already told me transition was coming. And it was only going to be the beginning. And it was going to be a momentum that it was like the beginning, that every next thing was just a next thing and a next thing and a next thing, that it's a season of go. And that's a good way to put it. I just kind of came out, a season of go. And because a lot of our lives, like I said, are built on our kids' activities and what they do. And you can kind of, as parents, get lost in the shuffle in your own life of what things are going. And God said, this is going to be the season of go. I like that. It just kind of got put in my mouth. And like I said, I had no troubles with it. When God's saying to do it, let's just do it. And remember how I said I find myself a lot like Joseph, that Joseph was the preparer. I've spent my entire life being the prepared guy. And so to be able to do things, you've got to work your way to them. You can't just decide to do things, but then have no money for it. So, things that we have that enable us to do here where we're at this moment, to do this without me blinking twice, because, man, I hate not having a plan. Our house is paid for. We owe no credit card debt. We have no vehicle payments. We have enough to sustain us and have some left over so we can give it, we can save it, we can have a future. And so when this moment came, it wasn't let me see what the checkbook says. It was, is God saying to do it? Let's do it.